So in the pack you are going to get two different dies. Now both of these are edgeable dies, but in this video I'm going to show you how you don't have to use them over the edge of a card, you can just use them as a beautiful decorative die. So this is the die we're going to be working with, and it's a little bit like a doily, and I'm going to start off by doing this lovely card here, and you can see just a bit of an accent with that beautiful cut detail with the backdrop of all of the other elements in the kit make for a beautiful card collection. So if we start with the cutting. Now I'm going to cut it into just some of the beautiful card we've got in the collection, right? Now bear in mind you're getting 24 sheets of the card in these lovely pastel shades. I'm going to use the blue, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cut myself a bit of card that's roughly the size of the die, okay? And you don't need to be exact about this. So we've got our piece of card there. And then you see when this cuts, how this die is designed to work is everything from this point around to this point, you can see it's got that cutting edge on, whereas everything the other side of it doesn't have a cutting edge. Now that becomes really relevant if you watch the other video, which is all about cutting on the edge. But for this one here, I'm just going to show you how we can just position it. Now I'm going to use the Gemini. These will work in all different die cutting machines. And this is the sandwich combination you're going to do. You're going to use the metal cutting through the die, sorry, through the paper into the base of the cutting platform. Then with the Gemini, we've got your clear plate, then your magnetic, then your other, in my case, very well loved cutting plate on the top. And I'm going to send them through there. I'm working with the big Gemini, but I'm using the Gemini Junior plate so that I can do my cutting in just a few seconds. Now, all of these dies are cut and emboss. So you can see it's done a beautiful cut out there. If you wanted to enhance it further by embossing, all you would do at this stage is go and add on the embossing mat. Now I like to do this by adding the embossing mat, then flipping back over because you need to take out the magnetic. So notice I sandwiched my magnetic on last, so that my magnetic wasn't actually touching the dies. So now I can send it through, first time to cut, second time to emboss, and it just gives that lovely little bit of detail on the embossing there. And you'll see just how beautifully well these dies release. I mean, that literally releases off there. It's even left all of the pieces. I'm not even having to sit and poke any of those pieces out, and then those will just come off easily. Ready for the next bit of the demo, okay? So you can see where it's cut that beautiful edge. All I'm going to do here is then trim the card to the width of the design. And so what it does is it gives me a lovely edge for sticking here, because we're going to stick that underneath, and then it's giving me that lovely detail. Now just to accentuate that a bit further, what I'm going to do is just use a little bit of brown ink and a sponge applicator. So I'm picking up the ink on the edge of my applicator, you see, and then just adding a little bit of ink around the outside like this. And all it does is it gives a little bit more of a distressed vintage feel to the edge of the project, okay? And just a little bit on the edge. It really doesn't need much, but you find the brown mixed in with those pastel colours gives a really lovely finish. So there's my edging, all right? So if we look at the card that we're going to do, we'll start and get the mats and layers ready. So I'm going to start with one of the base pieces of card, and bear in mind you get 24 cards with the corresponding envelopes in the pack already cut to size. So I'm going to start with the base, and then I have actually already cut just a little piece of that blue cardstock to mat and layer and to stick on the front. Now you can use any adhesive to stick these down. I'm just using one of the Crafters Companion tape pens because it's going to give me a great stick and be nice and quick and easy. Okay. Now, what I've then opted to do is take another sheet, this time from the paper pad. Now, say pad, it's a collection of papers. Again, you're getting 24 of these papers in the collection, lots of beautiful designs, and because they're for card making, we've kept them at 8x8 size, so each one of these sheets you could comfortably use for 2 or 3 card bases, okay? Now, I've cut a piece down with some flowers on, and again, I'm just going to add a little bit of colour around the edge, just to give it that little bit more of a vintage, ethereal type feel to it. Now I'm using one of the sponge applicators, so I'm picking the ink up onto the edge of the sponge so that I can work it into the side of the cardstock. But you could equally use any sort of applicator, or a makeup sponge works just as well. And you can see it just gives that kind of vintagey feel around the outside. Just really adds to that there. Just pick up some of that excess so I don't get that on my card. And then what I am going to do is just shape the edges. So if I bring in here's my scissors. Can you see if I just shape this round like this over the edges of my scissors, you can see it's very easy just to shape those edges. And it's just going to give a little bit of movement in my card. I'm just going with the two opposite corners. Nice bit of shaping. And again, I think I'll add a little bit of colour onto that edge there so that it doesn't look so stark and white when it's turned over. I've specifically made all these papers single-sided because they're used in card making, so it's not very often you'd see the back there. Okay, so I've got that lovely bit of shaping going on, and then that's going to be ready to stick onto the front of the card. And again, just using the tape pen for ease. And when I do my mats and layers, I tend to just leave about 1/8 of an inch around the outside, just to give that little bit of a hint of colour. Now, bear in mind, because everything in the kit is designed to work together, your pearls are now going to work beautifully. And what I've done is I've got just a couple of shaped pearls here, and I'm just going to stick them on these little bits behind the corners, just to give me a little bit of a hint of something going on in the background. Just some little pearls there just to kind of sneak out from the bottom. Then we're ready to do some building up on the front. Now I've got my die, so I'm going to pop that across the centre, and you'll see it's not an accident that this die is exactly the right size to work on this card. When I've planned all of the cards in this kit, I've planned them all to work beautifully with the sizes that I've designed in the dies. So like I said, really not an accident there that that's going to line up beautifully. What I have done is just cut another little matting layer of cardstock to go on the centre there. So again, I'm going to just ink around the edges just to take some of the starkness off the edge there. Less is more with this sort of thing. Notice I'm just putting a little bit of ink on each time and then spanning that right out. And the more you go over it, you can always build up the ink on the edge. You can't take it off once it's on there. And then what I'm going to do, you see, is I'm going to just stick that underneath. So I just allow myself that little bit to tape it underneath, and it just has that peeping out a little bit. It just gives me that little bit of shaping and movement on the card, and that is going to go on up here. And what I am going to do is I'm going to give that a little bit of a 3D feel. So I'm going to use my 3D glue gel to stick that one down. But before we do, let's mount up the rest of it. So I've got here one of the sentiment cards. So bear in mind, in your pack, again, you've got loads and loads of these beautiful die cut toppers. And you've got a mix of the lovely toppers with the sentiments on. So You Are My Sunshine here. And then we've also got things like little tags. So I'd also brought in one of the little tags to use. And they're nice, these, because they're on a heavier weight cardstock, so they can hold their own without having to be matted and layered. But I am going to mat and layer that little tag. I've just cut myself a little piece of the blue cardstock, slightly bigger. Like I said before, just leaving around 1/8 of an inch to mat and layer that to give a little bit of shaping on here. And that's just going to fit underneath my sentiment. So there we go, You Are My Sunshine. And then you see in your packs of flowers, you get all these beautiful flowers. You can either use them with the stems on, or all I've done here is take one of the pink ones, cut it off right to the tip, and then again I can just distress it with some little bits of brown around the petals, just to make it all match in. So at the moment they're exactly the same colours to match in with the beautiful pastel papers in the collection, but they're easy enough to distress up. And again, I'm going to use the 3D glue gel for that. So just a little blob of the glue gel on the top. You can use any sort of, if you've got a 3D foam pad or even flat glue is going to work just as well. So to assemble the whole card together, a few blobs of the glue that I like to use. And these just act like a foam pad, but they're a little bit more convenient, I find. And then again, I'm going to put a couple of little blobs onto the back of here, so that that sits in the centre there. And then last but by no means least, you see you've got lots and lots of ribbon. So you've got 9 metres. So what's that in feet? About meters, about 3 feet. So you've got about 27 feet of ribbon. And it's all this beautiful pastel satin ribbon in 3 different thicknesses for you to work with. So I've just chosen the middle thickness. I've already tied my little bow there. So again, what I love about the glue gel is it's just easy to stick even things like your little bows on. So there is a nice, very simple basic card using the die that we have, not as an over the edge, but just as a beautiful decorative die. Now, sticking with that same vein, I wanted to move on to one of the shaped cards. So what I've done is I'm going to show you this one here. So this is one of the cards that it's like 6 inches square, but it's got a diagonal line folded across the centre so that it stands up, and this is what we call an easel card. Right, so these are the base cards and envelopes as they come out of the kit. Okay, so you've got the fold line in the centre, so it's going to fold up like this, and we're going to use it to make what's called an easel card like this. Another option is if you fold that back on itself, you can always do the card this way. Oh, there we go. Or you'd fold it back on itself, so you'd actually be doing it this way. So that makes this sort of shaped card. So it's just a different way. There's lots of different ways you can use that, the easel folded cards. But we're going to do it as an easel. So we're going to fold it this way around here, okay? Now, just to start and decorate it, what I've done is, again, used some of the lovely pastel card out of the kit. You've got some Craft Effect card in there. So I've got a couple of sheets of the Craft Effect card that I've cut into triangles. And again, I'm just going to ink those around the edges and do a little bit of matting and layering. And then once you've inked them, you see, all I'm doing is matting and layering the printed card onto the base colour card. And we're going to use them then on the front of the card. And I like doing the matting and layering because it gives the card that bit of extra stability. So you see that's going to layer on the front here. And then when that stands up, I'm going to use this beautiful one in the corner down here so that it will all marry up together, you see. And it's those beautiful Parisian style papers from the kit that just finish off lovely with that aged vintage effect. So I've cut them exactly to size to exactly fit the card. Okay, so there's the base part of our card. Then I've got the little bit of that craft card, and I'm going to again do a little bit of the cutting. So remember, we're starting off with the base cutting plate with your cardstock and your die, which must be cleaned from the previous use. So those last couple of bits that have just stuck in there, I'll take out, will just sit face down. So it's cutting through the cardstock and into the base cutting plate. Then you want, if you're using the Gemini, the clear cutting plate, followed by the magnetic cutting plate and your top cutting plate on top. That's the sandwich you want. Whether you're using the Junior or the big Gemini, it's exactly the sandwich you want for the Gemini. If you are using these in other die cutting machines, because you don't need to have a Gemini to use these, you're just going to follow exactly the instructions for thin metal dies. Now when we lift that off, you see that's cut beautifully. Then I'm adding on the rubber embossing mat, making that sandwich back up, but make sure you do then turn it over and take out the magnetic. You don't want both of those in at once, okay? Now when we lift this off now, Again, look how easily that releases. So just a couple of little pieces in there that need popping out. The dies are all coated with a special coating, which is going to mean that they are going to release out very, very easily and give you that nice finish. And then if you remember from before, all we do is cut off to the size of the cardstock. And this time I'm going to cut right down the edge because we don't need any flap for gluing. So we've just got that flap, and then again I'm just going to add a tiny little bit of colour into there. So just with the colour that's already on there, I think. Now because the die is a bit smaller, my plan was to use it over the front of the card like this. Oh, there's a little piece I've just left in there. My plan was to use it over the front of the card like this, but I would have liked it to go right to the end. However, what I'm going to do is use one of the toppers over the front. So actually it covers most of it over. So what I am going to do here is just trim that right down the centre. And then I can connect this on. A little bit of tape there. Connect this onto this half. And the same connecting it down here. So I'm taking it roughly to the end of the card there. And then you see my topper is going to cover over that connection. So again, I'm going to use some of the 3D glue to give that little bit of a lift. And I'm going to have that lifting over there. Now, just ready to decorate it again. I'm going to use some of those lovely pearls again, just at the sides. I do think they look really professional. And you see you've got different sizes of the pearls, so I'm going to use a large one and a small one right next to each other. This is what I love about the kits, is having everything perfectly matched, perfectly colour toned, all the components that you need to make your professional cards in there. Same with some of the flowers. I've cut out some of these lovely little flowers. And again, I'm going to use just some little globules on the corner, just to give it a bit of a dimensional feel. So there's the front of the card taken care of. Now, anytime you make an easel needs something for this to hold it up. So it goes flat to go in the envelope like this, but then it needs to stand up like this. So you need something here to make it stand together. So what I've done is just taken one of the tags from the die cut topper set, and I've actually cut around it onto another little piece of the cardstock, just to give it a little bit something different. Just give it, and again, I do like a little bit of colouring around there. And if I stick these together, I think it just adds that little piece. There we go. Stick them over top of each other just to give it a little bit of a shadowing under there. So that is going to go and form the stopper here. So again, you must use 3D, whether it's foam pads, whether it's a glue gel like this, but it must be three-dimensional to be able to hold that in place. And the last thing I'm going to do is use a tiny little bit of this to hold the ribbon. I do like finishing each of these off with a little bit of ribbon, you see. So it just finishes it off that like so. And that's going to hold that in place, finishes the card beautifully. So hopefully that's given you a couple of ideas of what you could do using the die, not as an edgeable, just as a beautiful decorative die, tying it in with some of the lovely papers in the set.